Hello, today we have the fifth lecture, and I'm starting a topic. I will try to give it today in the span of one lecture, but it is big. The topic is big. It is big and is one of the most important. This is human psychology. The next lecture will be partly devoted to it, apparently. We will finish human psychology and then spiritual culture. So, the picture I drew last time, it's worth drawing it again. Statistics on the distribution of people by some parameter. On the upper axis, the number of people who are distributed according to some parameter. This picture is often used in statistics. We will again take, like last time, dobro and evil, because our subject concerns precisely these categories. And in general, this picture is only for the crowd elite society. The crowd elite is presented in the form of a pyramid. At the top, the initiates, then the elite, below the crowd. It is suitable for a crowd elite society. What is under the hump, as it is called by those who deal with statistics, the shaded sector, this is the main amount, 90%. This is the norm. This is normal people. These people call themselves normal, and they are considered normal. Laws are written for them. But it is basically clear to everyone now that laws are written for normal people. But in the main, the people who break the laws are either from here, all sorts of murderers, villains, or it is people like Jesus Christ who break them. I said last time, historically this person existed, we believe, a previous man, just like the other ones, this topic of the last lesson. Moses, all the previous ones, they violated the laws. And Muhammad, the prophet too. He was practically expelled. He had to leave his homeland to Medina. He stayed there for more than 10 years, then returned with an army and conquered. He was also a criminal in relation to the laws that existed then. Jesus was also a criminal, and Moses too. In general, everyone, if listed, they fell into this category. But if we take the scene of at least the execution of the New Testament, then there were characters. One was released on the occasion of the Jewish holiday. In any case, there were 3 crosses, if anyone remembers from the Master of Margarita. On these crosses there was 1 previous man and 2 villains, evildoers. And they were all criminals. They were all not normal. The question arises, what is the norm in general? Is the norm for people correctly prescribed? The one that is prescribed in the legislation? Is the norm correctly reflected in the science called psychology? And you guys take psychology, right? You've had it.
называется психология. И у вас психология была, да? Психология. Женщина читала? Нет. Или не женщина? Не было психологии? Мужчина? Ну, на дневном была женщина.
Now I'm going to say some things that do not quite, to put it mildly, fit in with that psychology. Because we are approaching this question as if from the future, relying on the past. In Russian, there is a letter Z. According to the pre-revolutionary letters, it meant the word живите, live. Not exist, but live. And the word жречество, жрецud, begins with the same letter. So it will be from the position of the жрецud, and not from the position of academic science, that I will give you the psychology of man. It will be different from the psychology that you took as a part of the usual course, which is given with an entry into Freud, apparently, and others. So this letter, жрецud, живите, it can be represented as, here is the past, this is the present, and this is the future. It's a kind of introduction. Through this letter, the fundamental question of philosophy is easily explained. You were also given this either within the framework of the whole of psychology or you had the science of philosophy. The fundamental question of philosophy: what is primary, matter or spirit? I've already mentioned, nothing is primary, but everything is determined by measure. We had this theme, and here too. The fundamental question of philosophy is that all people of the whole society should potentially be жрецы. That is, the functions of the жрецud should be available to everyone. Biblical Moses spoke about this. There is text. We will put it later in the video so as not to dwell on this. That it would be good if all people were жрецы. The fundamental question of philosophy is that in the present, a person should, relying on the multi-aspected past, determine one of the variants for the future. That is, the predictability of the consequences of making decisions in the present. And this is the fundamental question of philosophy, the predictability of the consequences of decision-making. The future is multivariant. You need to choose the variant that does not harm. But it must be chosen in the present, based on the past. It is multi-aspected. That is why the function of the жрецud is to not harm and to implement this formulation of the fundamental question of philosophy, the predictability of the consequences of a person's decision-making. Of course, for everything else, consequences for people and for animals, for the biosphere, and so on, and for human activity. But this issue cannot be resolved being in the state in which society is now, where the norm is. In principle, there should not be such a hump in a normal society if it is not a crowd elite society. Because for the entire period of the existence of the crowd elite society, the question of the predictability of the consequences was resolved for themselves only by the highest initiates at their own discretion, but not with the objective of developing the whole society was it resolved, but it was resolved with the objective of the security and well-being of the elite and the жрецud itself, which then degraded already into znacharhood in accordance with this picture. It is no longer a жрецud. That is, this question is not resolved for the whole society. But the question also arises, where is the norm? If the majority of people in society who are now, they consider themselves normal and are considered normal, what is our norm now? The latest with perestroika? If you don't drink, then it means you are sick or you are not normal. That is, it is normal to drink. 70% of men and somewhere around 40% of women in our Russian society smoke. Also, if in the collective you do not smoke, you will soon be considered not normal. Screwing around, wherever it might happen, this is also normal. That is, if in a collective, I know that conversations among men, in any case, in different collectives, and in those where they wear ties too, they will go to the toilet to smoke, who screwed whom, how much they drank, cars, well, football, maybe a little more. And this is the norm now. For them laws are written, serve. Now the culture of such a special guardianship of the disabled is becoming a norm too. For this, laws are being written with a special, so to speak, emphasis on both safety and care for people who are not quite healthy even physically. Because there are more and more of them. This is also a norm. Again, evildoers with some deviations, to whom in general they were always attributed, underwent psychological examination in all societies, and when there was the Inquisition, they were simply killed. And in Soviet times, there were two methods in relation to the evildoers. It was either a mental hospital or a prison. But the same is true for people with deviations into praviousness. Naturally, we stick to the fact that those who are on the right, prava, of this chart, those who are on the right of this chart are right. There is a Russian proverb, not sinful before God, not guilty before the Tsar. Therefore, in principle, it's better not to break laws, but to be able to use them the way that those who write them and control them use these laws. To do this, you need to know a lot. The question is about normal. What is the norm? Well, if we consider the human psyche, the word psyche in Greek means soul. That is, the word psyche is from the Greek word for soul. There was the concept of soul. In the 20th century, at the end of the 19th, the concept of psyche appeared. Basically, this concept appeared when the world hit atheism. That is, religions ceased to put pressure on science. But this word comes from the concept of soul. The separation of the concepts occurred right with the advent of atheistic science. And this division of concepts happened quite correctly. Because the soul and the psyche, in the modern understanding and in the scientific one, and in our subject, these are two different phenomena. But they come from the Greek word soul, psyche. The soul is something that is given from above to avoid confusion. The latest confusion began. This was during the development of ancient Greek sciences, that is, law, Greek law, then Roman law. So all these philosophers of ancient Greece, they mixed the concepts of soul and psyche. And they had in mind, when they talked about something, that this is something uniform. The soul is something that is given from above, for the period of earthly life, and is embodied in the body. The body dies, the soul is taken back. And the psyche, this is something that is formed from the potential of parents who provide the life of the soul
души и
and her
воплощения
embodiment, with their own, so to speak, existence.
существованием. И потом
And then the
приобретает
soul acquires something individual in the course of life.
как нечто индивидуальное. То есть душа
That is, the soul, this is something individual, given from above. The psyche, this is something individual, something that is acquired in life. Different things. The soul is immortal, and the psyche is something that has its lifespan only until death occurs.
пока не происходит смерть. И вот в этой
And in this
связи
regard,
мы будем сейчас,
we will now, today,
сегодня рассматривать
consider only the concept of psyche,
оговорять
making a reservation only that if there is a conflict between the soul and the psyche,
между душой и психикой, то человек
then a person
становится
becomes unhappy.
несчастным, у него
He
начинает
begins to have problems in life.
Почему?
Why?
Потому что душа
Because the soul is a
программа,
program given from
данная
above
свыше, как
as an
предложение
offer to an individuality
индивидуальности,
to go through the earthly path in the best
лучшим
possible
образом
way.
пройти программа минимум,
Under the minimum program, there is a maximum
программа
program.
максимум.
Moreover, to achieve the maximum program, it is necessary to live a very long, previous life.
Программа минимум – это
And
то,
the minimum
чего
program,
наступает
this is that below which death occurs.
человек в своей
If a
судьбе,
person in his life has fallen below the minimum destiny program,
ниже
then this is
программы
death.
минимум судьбы – это смерть. Она
This lower
индивидуальна
barrier
для
is
каждого
individual for everyone, and therefore this is also a purely individual thing.
И поэтому это тоже штука индивидуальная сугубо. А психика
And the
это
psyche,
программа,
this is a program,
совокупность
a set of
программ,
programs
которые человек
that a person acquired in life
приобрел в
from his
жизни
parents, first of
через
all,
культуру, от
through
своих
culture,
родителей, в первую
and so
очередь,
on.
через культуру и прочее. Ну, о ней мы
Well, we will talk more exactly about this, about the psyche.
Если есть
The soul and destiny
совпадение
are close
с
things.
этими программами,
That is, I just spoke about destiny.
душа,
That is,
судьба,
destiny is given along with the
душа
soul.
и судьба – это близкие вещи, то есть я как раз о судьбе и говорил. То есть вместе
If there is a
с
critical
душой
discrepancy
судьба,
between destiny and the
если
psyche,
критическое
then the person
несовпадение
is
между
unhappy.
судьбой и психикой, то
He has
человек
problems.
несчастный, у него проблемы, и вплоть до того, что
And up to the point of self-liquidation, with a very serious discrepancy.
всё это
These are all individual things.
То есть душа и
That is,
судьба
the soul is a kind of
некая
substance
субстанция,
that is given,
дается, и к ней
and the
программа
program for it
просто
is destiny.
недолго
That's it,
об этом не-
just not to dwell on it for a long time. Today we will talk about the
Сегодня речь
psyche.
пойдет о психике. Если брать первую плоскость
If you take the first plane of consideration of the psyche,
и забыть то, что
and forget what you were given on the types of psyche in psychology, you probably don't remember anything anyway, then the first plane of consideration of the psyche is two components, consciousness
две компоненты
and subconsciousness.
сознания и подсознание.
And it's better to say the unconscious.
Бессознательное. Бессознательное. Первая плоскость рассмотрения психики человека это уровень
So the
сознания.
first plane of consideration of the human psyche, this is the level of consciousness and unconscious levels of the psyche.
В этой плоскости.
First of all, it must be said what the psyche is in general in this plane.
Уровне психики. Представляет собой всю алгоритмику психики, то есть все
This is a
программы,
combination of
которые
consciousness and the unconscious levels of the psyche.
программы.
It represents the entire algorithmics of the psyche. That is, all the programs that a person carries, algorithmics, this is programs,
Психика.
that he carries in himself today,
Психика
at the current
это
moment.
все программы или вся алгоритмика, которая
The
несет
human
в
psyche
себе
is all the programs, or all the algorithmics, that a person carries in himself today, at the current
Она
moment.
состоит из этих
These programs consist of many particular algorithms. We will talk about them later.
алгоритмов, о них мы позже будем. И представлена
And the human psyche is
человека в
represented
основном
mainly
на
at the
физическом
physical level of the
уровне
nervous
нервной
system
системой, нервной
by nerve
системой,
cells.
нервными клетками.
what is recorded at the level of the nervous system. First of all, the nervous system is the brain.
На уровне нервной системы. В первую очередь нервная система – это головной мозг.
The brain, the nervous system, and then all the other cells of the body. So what is written there? It is the psyche. The psyche is expressed through the human biofield. The parameters of his psyche can be expressed through the human biofield. Now they have learned to measure it. Some parameters of the biofield are measured separately. The biofield of a person reflects the state of his psyche. That is, those programs that are recorded there. This is the settings, first of all. How can they be expressed? How to touch them? I say it very simply. In the textbooks it's more complicated. Everything is written there. You've probably noticed that some of you are friends with each other. You can be friends with someone, but with someone else you can't be friends at all. You can't even get close to them. This is the settings of your biofields that are completely inappropriate for each other. Different psyches, antagonistic if you can't, and close in some parameters if you can. There are people who can't even sit next to each other. Everyone's psyche is different. In particular, in the Slavic culture there was a tradition of spending the night. It is clear that if a married couple is formed, if they can't even sit next to each other, this is not good. Well, this happens. When they get married drunk, under drugs, now either a marriage contract, and so on. And then mug punchery and even murders begin. So among the Slavic peoples there was a ritual of spending the night. It was back in the 19th century when future potential spouses spent the night in the hayloft or somewhere together without having sexual contact, being only next to each other. At this moment, their biofields, the biofield is depicted as an egg, interacted with each other. And after that, they determined whether they could make a married couple or not. This is also a biofield, its settings, a reflection of the psyche, how it has developed. But still, it is normal for a person, when the destiny, given along with the soul from above, in its, the destiny's, best part, as close as possible to the maximum program, it somehow at least reflects the state of the psyche. In a crowded elite society, conflicts between destiny and the psyche are very common. This is also just one example. Now you understand that if you have not tried your spouse before the wedding, it is considered that this is... Or you can do it like this, at more subtle levels. This is more accurate, because during sexual contact, there is an intense exchange of information at the level of the individual and collective spirit. And it is rougher than through biofields. It's possible to make mistakes there. Moreover, a lot of emotions and energy. That's roughly what the psyche is in a nutshell. At the level of the material carrier of the psyche, or the entire algorithm of psychic activity, this is primarily the nervous system, then the rest of the cells and so on, and the processes that take place in the organism. The nervous system is a collection of nerve cells depicted in medicine, a triangle with a dot, conditionally of course. a collection of nerve cells. What is it like if you passed computer science? An algorithm. In relation to information, this is an algorithm. So, the information that enters your organism both through the biofield and through the sense organs, I will talk about them later, it is distributed according to the algorithmics of the psyche, which is recorded primarily on nerve cells. Nerve cells have many such tentacles for this, where they connect with each other and form algorithms. Each thought is an algorithm consisting of nerve cells, that is, recorded on nerve cells. One thought can be recorded on millions of nerve cells, and memory also approximately works in this way. All information recorded like a tape recorder in the nervous system. While at the same time, the nervous system is also the carrier of the psychic component, which determines our thoughts, our actions, and so on. Therefore, also by the way, alcohol primarily affects the liver and nervous system. Moreover, irrevocably. In alcoholics, the liver is full of holes, the brain too. That is, fragments of the nervous system, primarily the brain, they simply fall out. You therefore lose memory, everything is written there. Intellectual abilities are lost, people become fools. If you drink from the age of 16, then by the age of 30, that's it. The functional capability is lost. Well, then it's clear, just dig in the ground. And in the best case, be at the bottom of the crowd elite pyramid. Alcohol. We have this mechanism spelled out in the book. Weapons of Genocide it is called. I showed you already where to find it. So, biologically, this is how it happens. Narcotics are the same, only faster. Narcomaniacs live 5 to 7 years after the start of active drug use. It also affects the nervous system. Well, in general, taking alcohol or narcotics affects not only the pleasure centers, but also affects the nervous system, blocking some of its fragments, which are primarily responsible for the perception of information from the outside world. Therefore, people start not to give a hoot about anything. But at the same time, in the morning, a person urinates with his brains or nerve cells. So that's why they need a lot of water to wash out dead nerve cells. But today this is not the topic. The algorithmics of the psyche. It is a collection, that is, it is recorded materially, and for everyone, of course, it is unique in life. This algorithm in life is unique for everyone. That is, individuality is given not only from above. Individuality is the soul plus the psyche in the first place. And only then already, behavior depends on it. The nervous system governs everything, thoughts. Or through your nervous system, thoughts are governed from the outside. Such as the algorithmics, such as the governance. This is basically how any computer works. If there is a program, then the computer works. If there is no program, then it's impossible to play any picture, video or information. There is no access, everything is blocked. It's the same with a person. If he didn't learn something, fragments didn't form in his psyche, according to the information received, then tell him, don't tell him, there will be no return. That is, there will be no reaction. He will not be able to dispose of this information correctly. That is, computer analogies now provide an opportunity to explain a lot at the level of technology. In our head, we have, roughly speaking, a hard drive, an analog of memory. We have a processor. One can say an analog of the processes that go on in neural networks. or basically it is intellectual activity, it is clear that if the cells are knocked out, the intellect falls. If the memory cells are knocked out, you don't remember anything. Drunkards don't remember anything. And there are other processes that can. There is RAM. This is basically possible closer to the level of consciousness. It is small in the computer. Consciousness too. There is long-term memory. Everything is also recorded, as on a tape recorder. Everything is recorded. But it's recorded not only at the level of the individual psyche. It's recorded at the level of the collective psyche, which we will study later, next time we will begin. I will briefly go on to consider the unconscious levels in the plane of consciousness. Consciousness exists only in people, in the species Homo sapiens. In any case, in a widely developed species, the level of consciousness. No other biological species has a level of consciousness. Why? The level of consciousness, it's signs. This is articulate speech. We can encode information and transfer it to another person, and he will understand what we are talking about. That is, only a person can transmit information through the level of consciousness. This is given from above.
То есть передать информацию через уровень сознания может только человек. Это дано свыше.
And therefore it is asked from a person more from above than from any other biological species. With all biological species, there is not a level of consciousness. Another sign of this is that any highly developed animal encodes its obrazes, what it wants, with just a few words, meow, woof, and so on. It cannot express what it wants from the level of consciousness. Well, as they say, it understands everything, but cannot say only. But it doesn't understand that there is only desire, because there emerge from the unconscious levels some impulses to actions. In Dahl's dictionary of the great Russian language, there is a proverb. A person has a will, and an animal has an impulse, an urge. In all other biological species, except for humans, there is only an urge to something. That is, some impulses that are worked out in the psyche of animals. An urge to some kind of action, and that's it. But there is no understanding. And will is also a thing that operates from the level of consciousness. Will, the ability to create, distinguishes people from animals. And freedom. Animals, other biological species, have no freedom. I will not draw. There is a concept in biology, trophic chains, a pyramid, who eats whom. It looks like this. Here there are bears, predators, then herbivores, then smaller ones, other things and bacteria down here. This is all programmed from above univocally. Moreover, in terms of the numbers, the higher up on this pyramid, the fewer units of this biological species exist on Earth, if man does not interfere with this. Elephants are the least of all, then lions come, there are a little more of them, then bears, a little more of them, and so on and so forth. And most of all, there are billions of bacteria that we do not even see, only under a microscope. It is all programmed from above. All biological species, except for humans, do not have such freedom, especially will, at all. Everything is programmed. Even the demographics of the animals are observed. This is a well-known fact. Scientists have developed it. There are graphs, how many of whom, of what species exist if man does not interfere.
Как он только вмешался,
But as soon as he interferes there, we should have cattle, for example, much less than it is now on the planet. Because man intervened, he domesticated animals, and, well, bred them as much as he needed. And if they lived in nature, there are laws set from above. This is also a separate issue, and it is now sufficiently developed in science. That is, the will, level of consciousness, the ability to transmit information through the concept apparatus, the level of consciousness, that is, to encode information, to encode obrazes that emerge from the unconscious levels to the level of consciousness. This is only in humans. And creativity, intellect, reason, and so on, also only in humans. This is given from above in order to figure out who is normal and who is not. The level of consciousness is what we understand. So I am now transmitting information. Sometimes it takes 2 hours to explain one drawing. The level of consciousness is a very slow thing compared to the unconscious levels of the psyche. The speed of information processing at the level of consciousness is a maximum of 15 to 20 units per second, 15 to 20 bits of information per second. Why is that? When there were film devices, for example, transferring images to a screen in cinemas, if the frame rate through the window is more than 16 frames per second, then you already see a solid picture. If it is less, then it flickers. They stop. You can see it. This is the level of consciousness. If more, that's it. The movie is already on. If not, then separate pictures. That is, consciousness manages to capture information, which is no more than 15 to 16 units per second in speed. The same is true when driving an automobile. Normal. When you are driving, you can note what is happening with you somewhere. These are 9 to 15 parameters. What speed you are going, instruments, traffic conditions, mirrors, rear situation, and so on. 9 to 15 parameters. 9 is better not to have more. It's difficult to track further. Traffic lights, pedestrians, and everything else. Otherwise, further accidents begin. This is the level of consciousness. But when you drive a car well, then a lot of what you see when you learn goes to the unconscious levels. That is, to the automaton. So it's easier to drive. In short, it has been proven, more examples are not needed. Consciousness has an information processing speed of 15, maximum 20 units per second. The level of consciousness can be somehow expanded. These are practices, but we are talking about the average number, about those people who are normal. Basically, everything concerns those who are normal. Unconscious levels of the psyche. Well, it's very difficult to say by how many times. Probably millions and billions of times the speed of information processing is greater. That is, the brain, the human nervous system. Well, now most normal people, given their genetics, upbringing and culture, use only 5 to 10% of the nervous system from the potential possibilities given from above. They need to be developed. These even 5 to 10% work millions and billions of times faster than the level of consciousness. That is, the unconscious level of a person is the main means given from above for receiving, processing, transmitting information, and as a guide to actions, thoughts. From the unconscious level, they send signals to other cells, to other organs, in addition to the brain, to the muscles, how and what to do, and thoughts. Naturally, a thought is also algorithmics that I drew. All information falls on the ready-made algorithmics in the psyche, what has taken shape. It can be called somehow the worldview of a person, because the unconscious is, of course, information in obrazes. Information is encoded on the unconscious in a completely different way than on the level of consciousness. But many did not even learn how to encode information at the level of consciousness normally, even after graduating from high school. There are people who want to say something, even from the elite, sometimes you see it. They go to the stands and moo like a cow, or they hum. These are the problems with encoding information from the unconscious levels to the level of consciousness. The person must master this. Then there is some agreeance, because in one more plane, we will not consider it. There is another plane, this is the right and left hemisphere of the brain and the psyche. The right hemisphere is responsible for the correspondence of the obrazes that arise in the human psyche with objective reality. We are not supporters of Eastern theories. We do not live in an illusion. As they say in the East, we live in an objective reality. We met, this is an objective reality. In the East they say, no, it's an illusion, it's a utopia. In the West it's the other way around. Until you taste the shit, feel it, you won't be convinced that it smells bad. It's the other way around. You have to feel everything, examine it, look in the microscope, then you will believe. And in Russia, people have the greatest correspondence. That is, for Russians, the right hemisphere works better, perceives objective reality more accurately than in the West and in the East. But we have problems with the left hemisphere, with logic. Therefore, we have Ivanushka the fool. He is deceived all the time. That is, we perceive God better. God makes himself felt through objective reality. But we have problems with logic. Therefore, Ivanushka is a fool. We are deceived all the time, advertising, all that. And most people, now there are even such experiments that it's easier to deceive a person than a monkey through any kind of advertising. That is, the psyche is also divided according to two parameters. This is the right, the left hemisphere. The right one is responsible for the correspondence of the information received by the person with objective reality. If we see that it is chalk, in the East they can say, no, it's something else. And in the West they will start looking at it through a microscope. Then only after a month they will make an examination and they will say, yes, it really is. With us it won't be like that, we will just say it straight away, yes, it really is. And the left hemisphere is responsible for logic, for how this information is distributed throughout the nervous system, for the bundles of these neurons and for speech. The left hemisphere is responsible for encoding information, for matching phenomena and names, concepts, more for concepts. If they work harmoniously, then a person, what he sees, this is what he generally says, and perceives the world as it is. And if not, you can often come across this. You probably have argued with someone about one and the same thing, that it truly is real. He says, no, it's not like that. That's the problem with the left hemisphere. Or maybe with the right one, that is, there may be errors both there and there, both in perception and in coding. If you draw the correlation of the conscious and unconscious levels, let's say this is a kind of ocean. The level of the ocean, the tip of the iceberg. This is the level of consciousness. And this is the unconscious. That is very small to huge. Therefore, any person in our civilization does not fully know himself. Why? Because the algorithmics of his unconscious took shape, circumventing his will, from his parents, his upbringing, through culture, largely bypassing the level of consciousness. It is very dangerous, not the Russian way, but we now have a non-Russian culture. This especially began to happen when television appeared. There is a very interesting report on the internet. It is called Television for Hitler. Failed experiment. So, Hitler, back in 1939, under the guidance of Tibetan monks, was given information by his specialist in programming the psyche of people in the occupied territories that it was possible to bypass the level of consciousness and through pictures to lay information directly on unconscious levels, bypassing the level of consciousness through pictures. So, television is a revolution in psychology, in the sense that when you watch something, passing by the level of your consciousness, huge amounts of information are left at the unconscious levels, these algorithms, and everything is recorded. And then these algorithms, bypassing the level of consciousness, can also be a guide to action, both to mental activity and simply to action, automatically. Guidance in life are bypassing the level of consciousness. A person does what he does not want, would not like to do. The unconscious is a thing in itself. All learning, basically, maybe not in universities, but in schools in many ways, takes place as the coding of unconscious levels. Therefore, the word school, it has been coined since the Middle Ages, is from the word scholasticism. And scholasticism is the coding of the psyche for a certain type of it, in order that the algorithms corresponding to the culture, necessary for the owners of this world, would arise. And what type of psyche? Later we will analyze it further. Therefore, you need to get into figuring it out with your unconscious. The sooner the better, for everyone who grew up in this culture, in the East, in the West, here. You've probably heard of the concept of the 25th frame. Well, this is the same. When a person sees 16 frames through the level of consciousness, and the 25th frame bypasses the level of consciousness. Now, all the media are working like the 25th frame. It lies immediately on the unconscious levels, and consciousness does not notice it. All advertising. You saw an advertisement that Tide powder is very good, a glass, everything washes. I'm not talking about ecology. But when she comes to the store, the housewife, after that she sees there the powders are, she takes exactly Tide. Why? She doesn't even know. She watched the ad. And there is also hidden advertising. She can't explain why at all. At least in this case she can say, they'll come to me if I don't buy. I better buy in advance. And there is such an advertisement where she will not even be able to say of what. This is all bypassing consciousness. Well, otherwise it is called, not very correctly, stereotypes of behavior. Where do they come from? They are laid down mainly through culture. From parents, they go along family lines, a certain potential. If it's good, then fine. If not, it will be even harder to filter all this blah 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 that bypasses the level of consciousness. A person should have a sentinel. Here, on the border between the level of consciousness must govern the sentinel. If it receives some information, immediately, good or bad. If it is not determined, then there must be a bunker, a sump, where the information comes and stays at the level of the psyche. That's when the psyche works more or less normally. If it immediately fails at the unconscious level, then it may emerge later as some kind of mistake in life. So, the level of consciousness is given only to man. Another purpose of the level of human consciousness is to control your unconscious, to change it. Animals cannot do this. Another purpose of the level of human consciousness is to change one's psyche. First of all, of course, we are talking about unconscious levels from the level of consciousness, because the psyche is, in accordance with what we already know now, the psyche is the level of consciousness, the unconscious level of the psyche, and this is also the collective psyche, which we will talk about next time. That is, motivation of thoughts, life activity. This is the level of consciousness, unconscious levels, and the collective psyche. So it gives a general motivation and is represented by the algorithmics of the human psyche. That is, information that is structured according to neural chains. And neural chains are formed in the nervous system throughout life as they have taken shape. Mostly, these are the unconscious levels. Another purpose of the consciousness is to control and change your unconscious. This is only given to man. That is, man, a person, can change the type of his psyche. Animals cannot do this. Everything is there as it is set. Everything is programmed by and large. This is necessary for safety of life activity, for making the right decisions, and in order that a person could constantly make decisions in accordance with the fundamental question of philosophy, the predictability of the consequences of these decisions for oneself personally and for society. That is, to control. Therefore, consciousness, in fact, it is, as it is here, traveling through life on the unconscious levels. These go, it sits and governs, it must govern, give approval or impose a ban on what one wants, and what emerges from the unconscious levels here. So if you want something, it must pass through the level of consciousness, even if you really want it. It's necessary to give approval or to impose a ban. Whoever's level of consciousness does not deal with this, then he does not work with his psyche. And it simply rides like a passenger on the unconscious levels that have developed over a period of life. Well, and something that is given from birth. What example can be given here from techniques for greater clarity? Modern civilization, one of its greatest achievements, where everything has been manifested, all the best, so to speak, advanced achievements of mankind, this is the aircraft industry. A modern liner consists of a control system which is called the autopilot. The autopilot of an airplane can be likened to the unconscious levels of the psyche. And the pilot is the level of consciousness that rides on this plane. There are two pilots, we will talk about one.
бессознательных уровней психики. Автопилот самолета. А пилот – это уровень сознания, который едет на этом самолете. Там два пилота, как будем говорить об одном. Вот.
A huge number of people took part in the production of the autopilot settings.
Принимали участие огромное количество людей. То есть автопилот,
That is, the autopilot, in essence,
культуры, цивилизации.
this is the fruit of the activity of the culture of civilization. Especially now, it is generally global, because some blocks are taken even from Japan, from Europe, liners are made from America, for example, the same Ruslan or other huge aircraft. And practically, in the production of setting up the autopilot algorithmics, it can be said that the whole civilization of the culture corresponding to it worked at this. It is the same with the person. The unconscious is the fruit of activity, the fruit of the reproduction of this culture in ourselves throughout life. And the pilot is the capabilities of a person, rather limited in relation to the autopilot. What should you do if the autopilot fails to avoid a catastrophe? When the plane crashes, everyone crashes. What should you do when the autopilot fails? The pilot takes the helm into his hands so as not to fall. And it's in this same way that everyone should deal with his unconscious. If it fails, and especially in life you have a black streak, failures are coming, you must stop and take control of your psyche from the level of consciousness. Because there is an error. When a plane crashes, the autopilot fails, it is a catastrophe. Everyone crashes. But if the autopilot is set up properly, then it can be that the pilot doesn't even have to do anything, even when landing. There are such aircraft. Well, when landing, you still usually have to take manual control and also during takeoff. If the autopilot is working properly, that is, the question is in the adjustment of the unconscious levels. If they are ideal, then the consciousness rests and moves, and everything is fine. If the unconscious levels are set up incorrectly, or there is a failure, then only from the level of consciousness, through the will, can a person correct mistakes in life. In essence, any person, well, without absolutely pathological deviations, if there is will. In our country, unfortunately, most people are willless. There is no will, or it's very weak. We can't even stop smoking and refuse when offered a glass. Well, I'm not going to talk about other failures. This is also about will. It is unconsciously attuned to this very culture. If it is tuned to such a normal culture, I can responsibly state that these normal people are now being led by the global government to catastrophe. But they don't understand it because they are normal. They are not from here. Here, they understand this, because you need to think about the future. So basically, in this plane, if we consider the psyche, then in short, such problems are faced by people. By all people in general. Once again, what is the algorithmics of the psyche? The algorithmics of the psyche is what has taken shape and been recorded primarily on the basis of the existing entire nervous system. First of all, the head, the brain, and the entire nervous system in general. Well, nerve endings, they are everywhere. If you prick yourself with a needle, even in the leg, there are nerves there too. Therefore, the biofield, it covers the entire human body. It is drawn like an egg. If the psyche does not correspond to the ideal, then those who can see the aura, or biofield.
или биополе, они говорят,
They say
что
that the egg
яйцо
is
с
flawed.
изъянами. А если
And if
есть
there are
изъяны,
flaws,
а задано вот
in such a
такая
form as an
форма,
ideal is given,
как идеал, то сюда
then alien information invades here. The defense is broken.
она пробита как на
It is broken both at the spiritual level and at the physical level. These are illnesses and so
То
on.
есть нервная система, если
That
она
is, the nervous
настроена
system, if it is set
правильно,
up correctly, according to the ideal psyche, then a person is invulnerable.
уязвим. Идеально.
If not,
Если нет,
it turns
получается
out
вот
like
такое.
this.
Психические-
All physical illnesses are the result of
психические
psychic
болезни,
deviations.
психических не
Well,
вирус.
AIDS is not a virus, just like tuberculosis is not a virus either. Now this is also proven.
Это доказано.
Why do people get sick more and more often?
Почему чаще
This is due to some critical mental deviations.
психических отклонений, критических каких-то
Immunodeficiency,
прочее,
other things develop.
развивается
There is simply no balance of necessary microorganisms in the whole organism.
микроорганизмов в организме,
The balance is
во
disturbed.
всем организме. Нарушается баланс. Вот почему важно-
That is why it's important to mind your unconscious.
Вопрос как опять? А где
The question is
идеал?
again, how?
Выражается
Where is the ideal? It is expressed in the settings of biofields. Biofields can be sensed.
биополе. Вторая плоскость рассмотрения психики по ее компонентам.
The second plane of consideration of the psyche in terms of its components,
Ну, обеспечение
ensuring the life of any biological species.
биологического вида,
This is known from biology.
это известно из биологии. Оно
It occurs on the basis of the following components.
компонент.
The first is unconditional reflexes.
Безусловная рефлексия. Кто-нибудь помнит?
Anyone remember what it is?
Дается
Given
от
from birth,
рождения, задано
given from
свыше.
above.
Это очень
These are very short programs that provide life support.
обеспечивающая
If you are
жизнь.
pricked, you withdraw your
Вас
hand,
укололи, вы
or the
отдернули,
place where you were pricked.
либо
This is a
только
reflex.
укололи. Рефлекс. Вот. Если что-то еще,
If something else, the organism's reaction to some disturbances are standard.
ощущения стандартные. Они даны
They are given to any, especially higher biological species.
биологическим видам,
In this, man is no different from an animal.
от животного.
These are innate things.
Врожденные.
The second is innate instincts.
Врожденные инстинкты. Врожденные инстинкты. Более
These are more extensive programs. Again, it is also written in the algorithmics of the psyche,
в алгоритмике психики. Но
but it is
это
univocally
однозначно
determined from
определено
above.
свыше. Рефлексы и
Reflexes and instincts, if there are absolutely no deviations when born with various defects, Down syndrome and everything else, so on,
это дано всем,
this is
примерно
given to everyone,
набор
approximately the same set,
всем расам,
all races, nationalities, and animals.
и животным. Это более
These are more
обширные
extensive
программы,
behavioral programs that ensure
обеспечивающие
survival, life
выживание,
activity.
жизнь и деятельность. Например,
For example, the instinct of procreation of the species, the most basic instinct. If it weren't for it, we wouldn't be here.
Да, что это такое? Инстинкт продолжения рода, основной инстинкт. Если бы его не было, и нас бы с вами не было. Ни один
No
биологический
species could reproduce without the attraction of one sex to the other. It is
тяги
called
от
basic
одного пола
instinct,
к другому. Он называется основной инстинкт.
a very important thing for young people now.
Для молодых. Если бы его не было, и нас бы с вами не было. Ни один биологический,
Very important thing for young people now.
биологический, ни один 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 биологический,
where it all comes from. Another instinct is self-preservation. In animals, this is expressed as fear or a struggle for a habitat, niche, etc. People also have an instinct for self-preservation, especially when a mother brings up a child. She provides him with survival until he himself can do it. Well, and so on. Food, housing. It is all instinctively conditioned. Any biological species, for example, a bird will not dig a den for itself, it will build a nest. That is, it is all programmed. A bear will dig a den and will not live somewhere underwater, like a turtle, for example. That is, all this is programmed at the level of fairly extensive programs. It is called innate instincts. Well, reflexes are smaller. And there is a third component, not univocally programmed potential. This here is univocally programmed. For each biological species, there is a cave, a hole, a nest, and so on. And the habitat there is also programmed. For a person, no, the whole planet. Not univocally programmed potential. In biology, this is called conditioned reflexes and instincts. Conditional. This is already what is acquired in life. If you teach a cat to go to the toilet as a kitten, then she then goes precisely to that place. Well, it is more likely that she will go there. If there is no conflict with what is innate, if someone did not teach another before, but then it entered genetics, then it could teach others. It goes into the genetics. That is, not univocally programmed potential or conditioned reflexes and instincts. They are included in genetics and are transmitted to some extent from generation to generation. It is the same with man. But this also applies to a certain biological basis of the species Homo sapiens. This is generally taken from biology, and I haven't said anything special here. These are all biological species, except for humans, who are not limited to these components. In this plane, if we consider what determines the character of the psyche, in humans, the following component is added. The traditions of culture. It is also not univocally programmed potential, but it no longer concerns a biological basis, but more a spiritual one. There are people who place the traditions of culture above even basic instinct, even when young. You know, probably, there are your acquaintances, people who are very passionate about something and they don't even need a sexual partner or family. There are such. These were especially valued in medieval culture, even in Buddhism. And they were good servants, they didn't rush at the woman of the master. Well, in order not to rush at all, for sure, they were also made eunuchs. Because the basic instinct, this component, it dominates, as a rule, in modern civilization in the human psyche, starting from puberty. 13 to 15 years old, even earlier now, and it begins to put pressure on the psyche so much that all behavior in people is often subordinated to this component. And in other biological species, copulation occurs only at certain periods. In dogs and cats, this happens 4 times a year for several days. In birds, once a year. Also during the period of spring copulation, and so on. And now, for most normal people, this starts at the age of 15, and sometimes even ends at 60 to 70, because this component, the basic instinct, it dominates. I know such people. And there are people, there are not many of them, who are passionate about something and they don't need it. They don't need to eat, they don't need sex, nothing. But the traditions of culture are higher. The next component of the psyche is reason or intellect. Well, you understand the traditions of culture. So, okay, I need to explain. There are people who, from childhood, from their youth, are fond of something, they are passionate about it. For example, they get addicted to football. Well, basically, all my free time I spend watching football, analyzing the correlation of the teams, their capabilities, who is with whom, when, why, players, and even try to go there. There are such even now. They try to go to the World Championships. They are allowed there just so they can mind their own business. The traditions of culture dominate the psyche of a person so much that he does not even start a family for the sake of this on purpose, but he is engaged in something. There's another example. These are religious fanatics. Well, the extreme case is sects, cults, where all property is taken away. They sometimes even wait for the day of judgment. Or simply some teacher of a religious sect. He himself can also be either a charlatan or influenced by tradition. His traditions, his religion, he takes all the time, even people's property. They become slaves to these traditions. In the psyche, that component dominates, which was already ready-made in culture. Monks dress like women, now truly. Even in Europe, in France if I'm not mistaken, same-sex marriages are allowed. This is a separate topic of perversion. Monks, this came from Buddhism as early as the 3rd or 5th century BC. Monasteries appeared, where men and women go separately. There are men's monasteries, dressed like women, all in long dresses, sex is not needed there, and they pray all day. So, the traditions of religion, religious subculture, they dominate the psyche so much that a person becomes a slave of the owners of the monastery. And above the owner of the monastery, there are even higher level owners, the owners of the monastic culture, and if more, the church. And in many religions there is such a monastic culture. These people can be called otherwise fanatics, football fanatics, religion fanatics. This is how serious a thing it is that people are not guided in their lives even by the basic instinct that puts pressure on the psyche of all generally normal people, starting from the age of 15. Reason or intellect, this is already a higher component of the psyche, which also exists only in humans, and it ensures the life activity of a person out of his own will. This is the moment where the will appears.
с этого момента появляется воля.
If a person is guided by reason and intellect, then that means for him that there is already a will.
Интеллект – это способность человека производить
Intellect is the ability of a person to produce, not material, but an intellectual product, which is not available in a ready-made form in society. This ready-made lays down on mostly unconscious levels, the traditions of culture, the algorithms of culture. And this is already its own production of individuality. There exists a collective intellect, but now we are talking about individuality. That is, intellect is the process of information processing on the basis of the taken shape algorithmics of the psyche, the information that a person has, both external and internal. And this process of information processing ends with some kind of product. Everything that we see around us is primarily a product of intellectual activity. Once something was invented, then it materialized through production, but first it was invented. If we only use everything that is ready-made, we ourselves did not produce anything new. We take everything from culture. Then we have no will in general. If we are already producing something ourselves, this is a sign that there is a will. A person is given reason, given the opportunity to create, to change culture, including the tradition of culture. People with this component can overstep the traditions of culture. And everything that is given from above, as a kind of biological basis, including the basic instinct, can for them be taken under control. The next component is intuition. So the last two components, this is the most important component of human life, necessary for everyone. Reason, intuition, this is the sign of a human. If we observe the tradition of culture, this is not yet a sign of a human. Because it is a finished product, we come and we take it. Like an animal, it comes into nature and takes what is given to it. What about oneself? Then the question arises. Intuition, again, is statistically given from above to girls in a ready-made way. Well, intellectual potential, some kind of potential, initial, girls are given from above, from birth on average. Boys are not given. In this regard, they are deprived of intuition from birth. But this has been proven by scientists. And it is normal if by the age of 15, that is, by puberty, until one starts to suppress the basic instinct, if in boys, intuition is also developed to the needed measure, aligns with what is given to girls, well, also in development. And in girls, the potential for intellectual development from birth is less. But it's also normal if by the age of 15 it equalizes in both sexes. This is normal. That is, the intellectual potential of boys is a little more, but this is only potential. It is not given ready-made. And girls, as a rule, are given a certain minimum level of intuition in a ready-made form. Therefore, in this regard, girls are better oriented in life than boys before puberty. And further, of course, too. Why is it done? Because it is the mother who takes care of the upbringing of the child. In order to ensure the safety of the child, a certain lower threshold is given from above to the mother, which is necessary for the intuitive perception of information from the outside. You know, probably there is a saying, some kind of a principle, an aphorism, that a woman sometimes knows what to do, but cannot explain why. It comes from the unconscious levels. It does not come out at the level of consciousness. There is no understanding. While a man will not do something if he doesn't understand why. And this provides in general a conflict between men and women, especially in the family. If you don't explain to a boy why he should do something, he won't do it, if the boy is especially stubborn. Now everyone is stubborn. And the girl sometimes tells the boy that it's dangerous there. He keeps going there and runs into what she says. There are also many such cases. She turns out to be right. Because intuition is given to her, while the boy has no intuition. If it does not develop, then it is very bad. What is intuition for? Intuition is sometimes referred to as the sixth sense. We have 5 organs of perception of information from the external environment. Vision. Estimates vary. From 60 to 90% of information comes to a person through vision, in obrazes. Again, mainly to the unconscious levels. What passes through the level of consciousness in a day, for example? A little passes. What do you especially remember from a day? But at the unconscious levels, everything that you saw remains, if, of course, memory and so on are not broken. From 60 to 90% vision, in obrazes again. Obraz in Russian, in Latin, information. The remaining 30 to 35% is hearing, smell, sniffing, touch, you feel, and taste. So, 5 sources of receiving information. The 6th, it was not recognized by materialistic science, but this is the 6th sense or intuition. And everyone has gone through this in one way or the other. You've likely experienced when you want to call someone, but this person is already calling you. And this is intuitive perception of information. You don't even realize it. Or you remember someone and he enters the door, or he phones. This is the intuitive perception of information. But there can also be a more serious case. That is, information comes in addition to the 5 known sense organs. Therefore, intuition is a way of obtaining information from the external environment in addition to the 5 known sense organs through the biofield. A person communicates with the external environment not only through the 5 known sense organs, but also through the biofield. The facts are in abundance. The most important component that is choked by narcotics, alcohol, tobacco, intuition becomes simply none. As a rule, statistically, with the exception of some people like shamans, they have it all separately, but this is an exception. And ecology and other things that cannot provide disrupt the normal biological life activity of any species in principle and of man in the first place. The human chromosomal apparatus and the nervous system in general it is much more sensitive than that of other higher biological species.
Ну и
Well, it's
понятно,
also
что
clear that
интуитивная
we don't use our
способность
intuitive
есть,
abilities,
может даже там
which are
на
potentially given from above,
потенциально
at even a
заложить.
few percent.
И
The last
последний
component of the
компонент
psyche
психики
is guidance from above.
водительство свыше. Может быть
It can be expressed as intuitive epiphanies. It can be expressed through a dream. It can be expressed in any way, through other people, through distinction. I've already spoken about this, and so on and so forth. Guidance from above is information that helps a person to ensure his safety in life. Complete safety if it's carried out constantly, guidance from above, and partial safety if it's periodically. If a person corresponds in raviousness, so that God helps him, well, whom he helps and whom he doesn't, I spoke about this last time. Raviousness is given, especially distinction. So here we have, in general, the 7 main components of the psyche in this regard. This is where will comes in. If there is a will, then this is already something like a person. Because if there is no will, then this is an appendage, not a human, but an appendage to culture, or just an animal. Therefore, in connection with this gradation of the components of the psyche, we can conditionally distinguish the following types of psyche. Right up to here is the animal type of psyche. On the basis of the basic instinct, everyone can be convinced, the most important instinct, which is very difficult to overcome in animals. If a bitch has a mating season, a flock of males runs after her. You can't drag her by the ears. In general, they can bite and that's it, and you don't need to eat anything. There are also this kind of people. If this basis dominates, precisely dominates, because it is the basis of any biological species, it is a normal basis, then a person in life is guided only by these components in the main. This is the animal type of psyche. If the traditions of culture, again guided by the traditions of culture, everyone knows from zombie movies, the zombie type of psyche. What is laid, then gives out in life. Religious fanatics, football fanatics, well, I don't want to offend anyone. It's impossible. This is a finished product. Think for yourself. 22 fools without intellect, who are now being sold even from one team to the other. They're chasing a ball. Moreover, this is all now by agreement often, and people only get carried away with this in life because it's popular. Very stupid. But a lot of money is taken from this. Well, besides, it is also a reflection of some ancient Egyptian matrix. I don't think I talked about this. In short, it was 22 jretzes who ruled Egypt. 11 in the north, 11 in the south, and they stably ruled Egypt for several thousand years under the tandem principle, 10 plus 1 times 2. In England before, there were different compositions. Why did they take exactly 10 plus the goalkeeper? This is the matrix of ancient Egypt. What is it for? After all, hockey, not football, was popular in our country until the 90s. And then precisely football is all over the world, and it has risen. Football was promoted in the 20th century. It came to our country from the West, and there from England, precisely in the modern version. And it was known for a very long time, even in the Roman Empire. It is very convenient to watch. If young people are especially fond of football, these are the normal ones. This test launches here. He is fond of it. It's good. Beer was added there. And this country can be fooled as you like. The psyche corresponds to the type from childhood. But it's clear that here there can be no intellect. Here too there can be no intellect. Why? Because in Tsarist Russia, before the revolution, on purpose, understanding this matter, maybe not fully understanding it, there were separate classes of education. Gymnasiums for girls, gymnasiums for boys. So that boys, when they begin to get excited at 13 to 15 years old, would not drop in under skirts, but would be engaged in the exact sciences. Then, well, something close to a human grows. And if this dominates, all sorts of sense and other things sit nearby. And in our country, even in the Soviet times when I was studying, they also tied a mirror to the foot and looked. What is there? Well, what intellect can be spoken of? And then he discusses the whole lesson in mathematics, let's say, what he saw. It's understandable, right? These programs block the intellect. For girls, it's a little different. They discuss among themselves which is better. Therefore, separate classes are a very serious thing, a stepping stone to becoming a human by puberty, and not something animal. Well, then the traditions of culture have now reached the point where such perversions go through television. This is what the Tibetan monks said to the main ideologists of the Third Reich. You launch television into society, everything will change. You will govern this crowd as you want. What you show, then it will do. And it already worked. There were test launches of the first television, but then the war and it did not work. Well, then this experience was adopted, of course, not by the Nazis, but by those who now rule the world. Because if the programs are cognitive, where the intellect is involved, then a person develops normally, cognitively. And if entertaining, what are we showing now? Mug punchery, sex, booze. And this is the level of instincts and reflexes, reflection so-called. Then all this is cut off. The traditions of culture stand between man and animal. Next, if a person is guided by reason and intuition, a demonic type of psyche. The concept is also generally theological. Demons. Well, there are also Satanists. Demons or Satanists. I'll tell you the difference a little later. The demonic type of psyche is when a person can even treat the traditions of culture with contempt, step over them. He has his own product. He puts this intellectual product like a director. He definitely has to be a good director with the demonic type of psyche. Adds something of his own. Puts his will into practice as a director and changes culture. But this is not yet a human, because he does not coordinate his will with God. And a human this is when, on the basis of a biological basis, not being guided by the traditions of culture, taking only the good from culture, that which is good, and suppressing evil, with the help of his reason, his intuition, a human gives out a product to society, coordinating this product in terms of dobro and evil with God. I will not give the process of coordination. This is a very complex thing. It is described to some extent in our textbooks and is tied to the chain of nraviousness, the algorithmics of the psyche, and emotions. I will only say that emotions are given to a person as a kind of feedback from the unconscious levels of the psyche as to whether he does something well or badly. And this mechanism works normally only in the human type of psyche. Positive emotions indicate that the decision is made correctly only in the human type, while negative emotions indicate that the decision is made incorrectly. But the setting of this mechanism works normally only with the human type of psyche. With others, it can fail, that is, emotions, an emotional background. There is a saying, all are people, but not all are human. What is it about? And whom was Diogenes looking for? With a lantern in his hand, walking through the crowded Sinope with the words, I am looking for a human. Unlike other biological species, the psyche of a person is not univocally programmed, but is formed under the impact of the external environment and personal reason. The psyche determines human behavior and consists of the following components: innate instincts and unconditioned reflexes, stereotypes, habits, traditions of the culture, one's own reason, understanding, limited by senses and memory, intuition in general. Firstly, information coming from one's own unconscious levels of the psyche. Secondly, coming from the collective psyche. Thirdly, generation from outside and possession. God's guidance in the stream of providence is carried out on the basis of all the previous, with the exception of intrusions, delusions, and possessions. These components are present in any individual, but being differently enordered, give rise to different types of psyche. Therefore, a representative of the species Homo sapiens can have one of four main types of psyche structure. The animal type of psyche structure. Everything that such an individual does is aimed at satisfying instincts and getting pleasure. Sex, food, consumption of goods without measure. Often this is an aggressive, parasitic, antisocial type. Everything and everyone owes him, but he himself is not obliged in anything to anyone. Therefore, behind him remains a strip of devastation. The psyche type of a zombie biorobot. His behavior is based on automatisms that have developed by themselves or are imposed by culture and society. They are also habits. Such an individual reasons according to the authority of the leader, the scriptures of tradition, or simply accepts the opinion of the majority. In the case of a dilemma between instincts and habits, Habits win. The zombie abandons volitional decisions in favor of old habits and cultural norms. The demonic structure of the psyche. Its carriers are able to overcome both instincts and habits by force of will, developing new ways of behavior, gaining power in society. Demonism requires unconditional service to oneself, giving rise to the most sophisticated forms of suppression of others. Demons can be both individuals who prefer isolated actions and corporate people who prefer co-participation in any organization. The human psyche structure is characterized by a person's awareness of his mission, to be the vicegerent of God on earth. In Rus, since ancient times, it has been said, live according to Sovest. A person living according to Sovest sincerely believes God and acts as his vicegerent in the interests of the whole society. And the indicator of these interrelationships is the circumstances in which a person finds himself in accordance with the meaning of his desires and intentions. In other words, a human believes God, and God speaks to people in the language of life circumstances. Another type of structure of the psyche was created by people themselves. The structure of the psyche, lowered into antinaturalness, is formed when an individual uses alcohol, tobacco, and other narcotics. This leads to serious violations ranging from the work of the organs and up to the intellect and manifestation of will. Therewith, the amount drunk or otherwise consumed does not play a significant role. After all, for a reasoned person to suppress his own will and intellect is unacceptable in principle at the level of worldview. The type of structure of the psyche of an individual can change over time. All the knowledge and skills that a person carries are a dowry to the type of psyche structure and do not characterize it in themselves. That is, an individual can be an outstanding professional, have wealth and status in society, but at the same time not be a taken-place human. In our opinion, it is normal for the human psyche structure if innate reflexes and instincts are the basis on which reasoning behavior is built. It is normal when intuition provides information that can be understood through intellectual activity. That is, it is normal for the human psyche structure when, in its hierarchy, intuition is higher than reason, reason is higher than instincts, and altogether they ensure that a person abides in harmony with the Earth's biosphere, with the cosmos, and with God. The achievement by an individual of a human type of psyche structure by the beginning of adolescence should become the norm, but usually this does not happen because of the vicious culture of society and the mistakes of parenting. However, having matured and having realized the vices of his nraviousness, a person is able to move from any type of psyche structure to the human one. The non-human type of psyche structure is the root cause of most social problems. Therefore, their resolution is possible only with the personal volitional transition of the majority of people to the path of humanness.
Идеал.
The ideal of the owners of all religious systems, from sects, of course. What type of psyche is the ideal for the owners of religious systems and sects? The zombies, of course. What you put in them, that is what they do. You don't have to pay any money. Beliefs, you can force whatever you want. They laid it in the program. That is the ideal. It is shown in films. Well, you can see how religious holidays... Of course, one cannot offend the feelings of believers, but they must understand at what level they are in traditional religious systems. I'll use the example of the monastery again. What the zombification leads to. Most of the monasteries, of course, are for men. Why again? Why for men? Because boys, growing up, do not receive the information necessary for development in order to intuitively sense the world. That going to the monastery is still bad. It is necessary to create a family. One of the purposes, the meaning of human life at the biological level, It is not by chance that the main instinct is the main one, to reproduce themselves. Now we should have at least 3 children, at least 2 to reproduce ourselves. Otherwise they will come here and take over our still unpolluted territory. One of the meanings of life. But if a man goes off to the monastery, it's understandable, right? This is deep zombification. Lack of upbringing and love in childhood, fear of society. These are not some kind of strong-willed people. These are willless and cowardly people. They flee from society into isolation, into self-isolation, believing in... Well, girls suffer from this. It is clear that there is still a limited number of pairs. The skewed ratios of men and women in our civilization are a product of biblical culture. There should not be that 9 to 10. In China, it's on the contrary. There is a different culture. Excesses, this should not be. This culture has already entered genetics. If it was a different culture, the number of boys and girls born would be different. It is a given generated by biblical culture. In general, the ratio can be assumed quite accurately. This ideal of all church, religious, crowd elite systems has not been achieved to date. Therefore, they fail according to the law of time. And this thing is reflected in the alignment of Apocalypse, Revelations of John the Theologian, the last chapter of the New Testament, 22 chapters that also has Apocalypse. This is the mark of the Egyptian Shredsud. They had a hand in writing the New Testament. The number of the beast reflects the number of people, approximately, with an animal type of psyche, apparently all over the world. If some numbers are repeated, then, accordingly, the number of characters, even 2 would be enough. Well, 3 sixes, all the more with an excess per 1,000 people. About 70% of people in the average in the world with an animal type of psyche, or a beast type, the number of the beast. We now often see beasts that come, they pull out knives immediately. This is also an animal type of psyche, reaching the bestial. So, the secret of the number of the beast. It was seen from antiquity and was felt as a problem facing church hierarchies and their masters. These were supposed to go here. According to the Apocalypse, the beast must be destroyed. They are ungovernable. These people are ungovernable, according to traditions, according to the canons and so on, but they need a governable crowd. Here remain somewhere around 25%. These are about 5%. These are almost non-existent. This is roughly the situation. This is the result of what their owners and hierarchies have achieved in various religious cultures to date, against the will of God. The worst type of psyche here is this one, almost hopeless. It is useless to talk like with an automaton. It is called by a robot. Functional capability grows from top to bottom. The victory will be won by the human, as it is said in the Quran. those who obey God. But the governance of the world is now in the hands of these 3 to 5%. They are in many ways Satanists. Satanism differs from demonism in that Satanists, being a demonic type of psyche, deliberately act against the will of God. That is all for today. Next time we'll continue a little bit on this topic and then spiritual culture.